Republicans swear off earmarks, even the ones that help cancer patients.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Ann Fisher, host of All Sides with Ann Fisher on WOSU 820. William Hershey, State House reporter for the Dayton Daily News. Bob Clegg, Republican strategist. And Michael Daniels, co-publisher of Outlook Media.
Congressional earmarks may be a casualty of the 2010 midterms. The House and Senate are considering a ban. Earmarks are the provisions lawmakers quietly tack on to spending bills to pay for special projects in their districts or in their states. Even though they just make up a tiny fraction of the federal budget, earmarks have come to symbolize wasteful spending in Washington. But wasteful spending can be in the eye of the beholder. This year, Franklin County received about $15 million from earmarks. Among the projects, a $2 million addition to the Beetler Armory in northwest Columbus, $900,000 for the OSU Cancer Center, $650,000 for a child care center, and $500,000 to improve the Worthington sewer system. Bill Hershey, without the earmarks, are similar projects like these gone?
Not necessarily gone. It might be harder for them to be funded. I don't think Ohio is going to be neglected as long as it's a crucial state in the presidential election. But it seems to me that this will give the executive branch more power and more authority over where this money is spent. And we'll see how long this earmark ban lasts. I think in some ways it's sort of a feint. They can talk all about abolishing earmarks. I believe I saw one figure, it's 0.5% of the federal budget. Well, this is a way to talk about saving money and without going after the real costly things like Medicaid, Social Security. So let's see how long it lasts.
I mean, the Bridge to Nowhere is the most infamous, I guess, earmark, and it's just a symbol of spending money.
Yeah, and there was a Lawrence Welk Museum at one point, I think.
In North
Dakota.
A
lot of museums. I think the thing is that the earmarks are going to get to be like, or already have become like, your own congressman. Well, down with them all, the pox on both their houses, except for my earmark.
Right. Well, I think I agree with Bill. I mean, it's a very small portion of the budget, But I think what it does, it symbolizes the back and forth trading, just the whole way of business being done in Washington that we saw so clearly in the healthcare passage of the health care bill. And I think people were saying in this last election, we've had enough of that deal making. Let's stop that and let's move on and let's do what's best for everybody, not just for certain areas of the country.
Michael, is that possible to do away with the pork barrel politics and trading? I mean, it's been with us forever.
I don't think so. I don't even think that they'll necessarily, that the ban on earmarks will somehow fail and each side will blame the other for its failure. As you said, it's not a significant part of this. And the ability to be able to horse trade is part of politics. I mean, that's just part of what it is. I think it's also, it's one of the privileges of seniority. The longer you were there and the more favors you accrue, the more things you can then bring home, the more things you can put your name on. I mean, I suspect that there are lots and lots and lots of things in West Virginia named after Robert Byrd that might...
But I always thought when I was growing up that the whole log rolling concept had to do with policies. Like, I'll vote for your bill and I'll vote for that policy. It's all come down to these earmarks. And if you could eliminate the earmarks and have people focusing on, then they would actually be talking maybe about the policies.
So what is the budgeting solution? Is it the line item veto, where the executive, the president, or some governors have this power now? They can go in there and they can whack projects line by line. That's not a power the president has.
I don't think Congress wants that to happen. I mean, that would really take away their power. It would give the president even more power than he would have with this ban on earmarks. So I don't know.
Are they talking about a ban, or are they talking about we're
Temporary.
going to resist the urge to earmark?
Ban.
2 year. I guess one proposal is a 2-year ban on earmarks.
And I think the problem here is, for every good earmark that you can point to, there's like 7 or 8 bad ones that you can point to, like the Bridge to Nowhere or these museums or
unless
any
you're
of
in
this
that
other
district.
stuff. Well,
Unless
but even
you're
the
in that
people, even sometimes the people in that district see how bad. There are a lot of people that just want the federal government to spend their money correctly and wisely. And even if it's your own district, you may see that it's going to some armory and you're wondering, how is this really helping Homeland Security by spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in this armory?
And I think the wheeling and dealing did get a little heavy-handed. No offense to your party, when Congressman DeLay was in power in Washington, wielding power for Republicans, he was a master.
I don't think it was quite
that.
as heavy-handed as when they cut the deal with Bill Nelson to vote for, or with Ben Nelson to vote for the health care bill.
I
but
guess
that's
it's
okay.
deals in the eye of the beholder kind of a thing. But it's going to be interesting to see who capitulates.
How about a balanced budget amendment? States have to balance their budgets. In the Ohio Constitution, they have to balance the budget, so you're going to cut $8 billion if you can't balance it. Ever see that at the federal level?
Should be.
If
Should
they're
be.
going to ever do it, they're going to have to, what do you say, they're going to have to gradually implement that. They just can't.
Yeah.
Well, because we're
It'll
facing
take
a
decades.
14, 15 billion
Exactly.
or trillion dollar deficit.
It'll take decades.
We have a balanced budget in Ohio, but we have a balanced operating budget. We also have a separate process for issuing debt. It seems like the federal government all gets mixed up together, and it wouldn't be simple to start with, but there's no reason to not try to balance the operating budget at the federal level.
Completely agree. Sitting on the other side of the political spectrum, completely agree. There's no reason that we shouldn't do that. We have to do it sitting around our kitchen tables at home. The states have to do it. The city has to do it. The county has to do it. The state has to do it. There's no reason the federal government shouldn't also have to do it.
I tell you, if we did have to balance the budget on federal level, we wouldn't even be talking about earmarks.
Right.
Because that wouldn't be an issue.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Are states and cities able to balance their budgets because the federal government doesn't have to? Case in point, $8 billion during the economic downturn for Ohio helped them balance their budget.
Well, the federal government literally prints money, as we know now with this Fed policy, and when they don't print money or spend profit a lot, taxes get pushed down to the state and local governments, and so the federal government's sort of a safety net for cities and states.
But as Bill suggests, if we need that kind of a safety net at the state level, there could be potentially a way to raise additional revenue. I mean, you could do federal, everybody else does. You can have a bake sale or a bond sale to be able to do that. So you can still generate those kinds of revenues.
The same way, but you wouldn't generate as much because you're not printing it.
Right.
It would be a lot less money. And remember, the federal government pumps money into the states to do a lot of other things besides these frivolities. It builds roads,
Agreed,
and things like that, and bridges and that sort of thing, which we're already way behind on.
But unfortunately, this is only a temporary safety net because you can't count on it all the time, and that's why we're facing an $8 billion budget hole here in Ohio.
Let's get to our next topic. Now that the 2010 midterms are a distant memory, it's time to turn our attention to the 2012 election. That's the one where U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown will run for re-election, and while this month's election results have yet to be certified, partisans are preparing for the next statewide challenge. Bob Clegg, which Republicans are looking at possibly running against Sherrod Brown?
I think there are a few out there that are thinking about it. I think we have a couple congressmen, one being Jim Jordan from the Urbana area, and he was running for leadership in the House, and he's not wanting to talk about 2012. But I think that's something that's out there. I think Steve LaTourette from Lake County up in Northeast Ohio is being mentioned. It's probably something that they're thinking about. I also think if you look at statewide, everybody just has gotten elected, so you really wouldn't expect anybody from that grouping to be interested except for Mary Taylor, who's going to be the lieutenant governor. There was a precedence in 1992 when Mike DeWine ran against John Glenn, even though he had only become lieutenant governor 2 years before. So I think you would have to count her into that mix also.
John Husted, Secretary of State.
I think it's when you've just been elected to a administrative office like that. I think it's sure he would be a great U.S. senator, but I don't know if electorally you can do that.
Will Republicans make, if it was a mistake, the same mistake the Democrats made and have a primary like there was between Lee Fisher and Jennifer Brunner? Do you see that happening?
No.
It's pretty hard to tell this far ahead, but I'd say the Republican Party in Ohio is pretty well disciplined, and they've seen what happens when they do have nasty primaries like they did in the 2006 governor's race.
Ken Blackwell and Jim Pinchot.
And they didn't have one this year. They got Mr. Ganley out and paved the way for Rob Portman.
You have to figure that Sherrod Brown, though, will be in a much better position can't be any worse than Ted Strickland was in, or that Lee Fisher was in this time around.
I think that's absolutely true. I think, first of all, I think Sherrod is one of those characters that everybody loves. You don't have to agree with Sherrod, but I think that most people like him. I think the other thing is that Ohioans have shown for a really long time that they like having a Republican and a Democrat in the United States Senate. And I think that we'll continue to see that. So I don't think it's going to be something that Brown's going to cruise to re-election, but he's certainly going to be in a better position 2 years from now than the Democratic ticket this year was in.
Bob, do you really like Sherrod Brown?
I didn't say anything, okay? All I'm saying is I think it's not going to be as easy as you think it is. I think it's going to be all about, in 2012, I think it's all going to be about is President Obama. And I think depending on what kind of shape he is in will determine what kind of shape Sherrod's going to be in. He's got to defend votes for the stimulus that didn't stimulate. He's going to have to vote for a health care reform bill that a lot of people don't like. And my guess is whoever our candidate's going to be is going to be against the stimulus, against the health care bill. And, it's going to be a tough election.
It's going to be a lot about Obama, no doubt about it. But Congress, and whether Congress does anything over the next 2 years, I think is going to have a lot to do with the outcomes of the elections. Now, I think it's a lot more about Congress than it might have been.
If I were a Republican, I'd be afraid that Sherrod Brown might be the next Howard Metzenbaum. His policies people don't like, but yet he managed to win. He'd go into these southern Ohio counties and win. And Sherrod's a very hard worker, and he's got that populist streak in him that seems to even appeal to some of these cultural conservatives. Maybe you don't see that, but
I think voters now versus 20 years ago care about issues more, or understand and know about issues better than they did back then. And I think that's why this year you saw people, want to know if their representative voted for or against the stimulus or the health care bill. I mean, these are things that we never saw 20 years ago, people getting and knowing and understanding these pieces of legislation that they vote on.
Well, what about the stimulus? What if the economy's better in 2012 and you say the stimulus failed? I think it's too early to tell that. What if it succeeded?
Well, I mean, what defines success for me? 8% unemployment?
5% unemployment.
Okay. Well, 5% unemployment, we aren't going to be talking about the stimulus because Barack Obama will look like a genius and he'll get reelected easily.
But it's going to be somewhere between 5 and 10, I don't think.
Probably, I would guess.
We can hope, anyway, regardless
There's
of
the prediction
charge.
of the day.
He's against the climate bill. At least he's shown very serious concerns for the climate bill. Sherrod Brown has.
Well, he has concerns about the jobs that would be lost because of the climate bill, and he's been straddling that fence for at least 2 or 3 years, and doesn't want to, make his liberal supporters mad by being against it, but at the same time understanding that this could have a gigantic impact on jobs here in Ohio. Mm-hmm. So he's been trying to straddle it. I don't know how much longer he can.
Okay. The 2012 congressional races face additional uncertainty, the additional uncertainty of redistricting. That will take place over the next year or so. Ohio stands to lose 2 congressional seats, and that means state lawmakers will have to carve out new districts because Republicans are in complete control, they will carve the districts to favor their candidates. We assume, anyway. Ann Fisher, no relation. Let's start out with a lesson on gerrymandering. Just basically, how do they carve the districts to help their party?
There's so many people in the state, and the districts have to be equal, so they carve the districts out to make them population-wise equal. And, of course, they do it in a way, the gerrymandering part comes in when they do it to favor one candidate or one party over another.
They can lump all the Democrats in one, leaving other ones more competitive.
They could. Or they could make it look pretty good sometimes. Well, we got some Democrats in there, but they know their districts. They know them. Everything's computerized now. It's fascinating how detailed it can get right down to the city block.
Any speculation early, it's still early, as to which districts might be in trouble? You'll have to have probably incumbents running against
Republican districts, probably.
Well, I mean, I think the big, you talk about us losing 2, which we very well could.
That's the projection.
I mean, we could lose 1, though, by some miracle. If we lose 1, I think it's pretty obvious we're going to lose 1 up in Northeast Ohio, and it's a Democrat. If we lose 2, then that becomes a little, our success in this past election, and we'll make that job a little bit more difficult.
Do you think you could